This week, we're going to explore an interesting demon, one who has the ability to control spirits and bring them back. Fat cat. Hello, everyone. My name is Florio. Welcome to the channel, or welcome back to the channel. This week, we're doing another Demystifying Demons episode. And this show, essentially, what I'm doing is going through all the demons. We're starting with Ars Goetia. We'll spread out to other things as well. I have like a list of things. But I'm going through the demons. I'm letting you know their background, where their origins maybe came from, in an effort to demystify them so that people don't have to be so afraid of them, because the majority of demons are based off of old pagan deities, legends, myths, stories, things like that. And they're not these evil things that everyone needs to be so scared of. So that's sort of the effort of this particular show. And that being said, if you even believe in demons or anything like that too, that's a whole other side thing. But we're going to do the history of a demon, going through each of the demons in the Ars Goetia, and I'm finding the history behind them and where they started before Ars Goetia, or where Ars Goetia even got maybe inspiration for them. So this week we're going to explore the fourth demon in the Ars Goetia, Samigina, who is also known as Gamigin. I'm aware that I keep pronouncing Gamigin incorrectly all throughout this video. I just kept mixing it up with Samigina, so I apologize. So Samigina holds the title of Great Marquis, commanding 30 legions of infernal spirits. This demon isn't just some infernal stomping around in hell. Samigina shows up in occult texts as a scholar, a teacher, and most interestingly, as I said, a communicator with the dead, essentially a necromancer. He's a spiritual operator, part librarian, part necromancer, part professor. He's a lesser known figure in the Goetic roster, but it makes him fun to unpack. His symbolism is rich, and his mythological roots run in many possible paths, from ancient Mesopotamian gods to horse-riding psychopomps and everything in between. All right, let's get started and dive in. Goetian Origins. In the world of demonology, Samigina makes his formal debut in the Lesser Key of Solomon, where he's listed as I said, the fourth spirit of the Ars Goetia. And as well, if you want to learn a little bit more about the Ars Goetia, I'll link my original video as well to this. So he holds the rank of Marquis, which places him beneath the dukes and the princes in the infernal hierarchy. But still, he still commands his 30 legions of infernal spirits and possesses some really interesting abilities. He also appears in Johann Weyr's Pseudomancaria Daemonum, though there he is called Gamigin or Gamgin, depending on the translation, a variation likely chosen due to his secondary name. In that particular text, he is ranked much lower in the list. He's actually ranked as number 46. And that text offers a little bit more information about his abilities. The text describes how Samigina can force the souls of the drowned and even those in purgatory into airy bodies, compelling them to speak and answer questions. It's not just about calling the spirits, it's about wrangling the dead into temporary form. As with some other Goetian demons, Colin de Plancy, who does the Infernal Dictionary, makes no mention of Samigina at all, which is notable considering how exhaustive that work is. But the Infernal Dictionary has left out a number of Goetian demons. With the absence from the Infernal Dictionary, it's a mystery, either suggesting a scribal omission or that Samigina wasn't widely known outside the more niche magic circles at the time. The Kabbalistic Angels text, which is called, I'm going to mispronounce this, Shema Hafsora, has his opposition of the angel, his angel opposition is Elamaya of the Seraphim Choir. So Samigina is said to appear either as a donkey or a little horse. And it's quite interesting because compared to some of the other fearsome demons like crocodiles or multi-headed beasts, it's easy to get the sense that Samigina maybe is like not measuring up or somehow lower than some of the other ones because less scary. But we have seen some demons so far that have had a human form that also came across less scary. So sometimes this is about balance. spirits. But the thing is, Samigina isn't stuck in his equine form. It's just a secondary form that he takes. He can shapeshift, first appearing as a small horse or donkey, like I said, and then he can also assume his human form. And that gives us, again, another dual image of demon as rider and demon as steed. And with some of the other demons that we've looked at, there's been a duality as well to the imagery. It's a classic split between mount and rider, between the thing that carries and the one doing the steering. That duality gives Samigina a kind of autonomy and fluidity. He moves between forms, between roles, and between worlds of the living and the dead. He's not just a beast to be summoned, he's a conscious force that comes and goes as he pleases. Like many of the Goetic spirits or demons, Samigina isn't found in the canonical Bible. Instead, he's commonly identified as one of the fallen angels, celestial beings said to have been cast down after rebelling against God. And this is also similar to the previous demon that we discussed, where there isn't an exact pagan link, but I think I may have found it because there's a little bit more to go on with this demon than last week's. His presence is rooted in occult tradition, Renaissance grimoires, and the medieval hunger for secret knowledge, not scripture. But once he made it into the grimoires, he did stick around. Interestingly, Samigina may also appear in the Zohar, which is a foundational Kabbalistic text from the 13th century, and that is where he gets the name Gamigin. That's the alternate name that they know him as. In Pekude 848, Gamigin is described as a red spirit of unholiness who joins forces with Satan to accuse humanity. When prayers go unanswered and merit fails, Gamigin rises to assist the adversary in reminding God of mankind's sin. The text even puns on the Hebrew word gam, meaning also, implying that the adversary came also, and that refers to Gamigin as the secondary accuser to Satan. If this connection is intentional, Samigina's roots stretch deeper than Goetia and back into medieval Jewish mysticism, where he already played the role of a spiritual prosecutor. And considering in the Ars Goetia too, like they say that he has a list of who's in purgatory and who's in hell, it kind of matches with this accuser role. Imagery and iconography. All right, let's take a look further into the imagery and iconography of this demon. We'll start with the obvious. He shows up riding a donkey, or is a donkey. In some texts, it's a horse, small horse. In most descriptions, he first appears in the form of a small horse, or some descriptions say ass, which is donkey, before he shapeshifts into a human figure. This is a transformation that's symbolic in more ways than one. In demonology, form is function, and a demon that appears as a donkey isn't exactly leading with intimidation. Unlike, like I said, some of the other beasts that are there, Samigina rolls up in something humble, a low status, even laughable. And that's what makes him interesting. Because while the donkey might seem like a lesser form, it is packed with its own symbolism. Endurance, service, stubbornness, and as well, like the donkey was the worker. It was like the work animal. Samigina's imagery embodies humility and the underestimated power of knowledge. He becomes a symbol of historic wisdom rising up from unlikely places. The weird little horse demon might be doing double duty as both the rider and the mount in this symbolism. As well, because of his other abilities, which we'll go more into, being able to go between life and death, you could also see him as a carrier of souls and a spirit guide who steers the souls as well. It's a subtle nod to the concept of liminality, beings that exist between different categories. And when he's called upon, and he's the person who calls upon him orders him to be this beast that they can then ride. So he's like a servant as well as also a commander, a beast and a scholar. And also adding to his symbolism, he has a companion, animal companion, which is an owl. An owl is long associated with wisdom, foresight, the ability to see in darkness. This also reflects Samigina's connection to the hidden and the realm of the dead. It's a fitting pairing, the humble donkey and his outlier form, and the owl as his spiritual sidekick. Visually, he's not often depicted in art compared to flashier demons, but the rare images that do exist tend to lean into this shape-shifting nature, either showing a man with a donkey-like features or staging him in mid-transformation. And while we don't get a lot of classical detailed art like we do with other demons that we got from like the Infernal Dictionary and so forth, the iconography in the bit of pictures we do have remains consistent. Hooves first and intellect second. And one more thing, the donkey isn't just a random animal. In occult tradition, especially medieval magic and pre-Christian folklore, donkeys were associated with both fertility rituals and darker chthonic powers. They were actually sacrificed in some of the rites as well, and invoked in others, and were occasionally seen as protectors against evil. So a demon like Samigina, to appear this way, it's actually less of a punchline, more of a callback to some of the really ancient traditions. There is a power in simplicity if you know what you're looking at. Abilities. Okay, we've already been touching on his abilities, but let's get into it a little bit more. Samigina's abilities aren't flashy in the usual demonic sense. There's no firestorms, no plagues, no legions tearing through cities. Oh, well, he controls a legion of spirits, but regardless, his power lies in what he knows, and more importantly, what he can reveal to others and what he can make reveal. He's a necromancer through and through, one of the few Goetic spirits explicitly tied to the dead, and not just any dead, but the unsettled ones, the drowned, the damned, the ones stuck in between, souls that died in sin. According to multiple sources, Samigina has the power to summon spirits who died at sea or linger in purgatory, compelling them to take airy bodies. So they take like these temporary forms that allow them to appear, speak, and answer questions, which kind of like it describes a ghost, right? So I don't know how far back we describe ghosts, but essentially it's like a little spirit. And in magical terms, this makes him like a classic spirit interrogator. He calls upon the spirit and he's able to ask it questions and it's required to answer. So a practitioner who would summon Samigina not to torment or destroy, but to communicate with the deceased and extract knowledge from them. And that was what Samigina was usually invoked for. Interestingly, some interpretations suggest that this drowning may not refer to physical death by water, but rather a symbolic drowning, as in the souls submerged in the lake of hell. Because there's some question as to whether he just talks to souls in purgatory or whether the drowning means hell, right? The lake of hell. And if that's the case, Samigina isn't just summoning the lost, he's pulling them from the pit itself. And also some of the texts that refer to him actually being able to pull from hell, they also say that he keeps an inventory of hell, literally. According to some of the grimoires, Samigina knows who is damned, who's in there, and can confirm it. And he's got a list, I guess, of who's in purgatory too. So he's actually very helpful for this kind of stuff and has very protected knowledge, access to all the infernal records. So he's not just a necromancer, but he's like an archivist for hell itself. So, if someone wants to know if someone ended up in hell, they can call upon Samigina and Samigina can check the list. Outside of necromancy, Samigina is also a teacher, particularly of the liberal sciences. He teaches astronomy, geometry, rhetoric, logic, basically all the classical esoteric education. The knowledge he teaches is often sought by those interested in forbidden knowledge, ancient wisdom, and especially the mysteries of the afterlife. And here's where things get a little bit more complicated. Like Visago, Samigina represents a softer side of Ars Goetia, of the Goetian demons. So he's a demon that seems more like a scholar than a saboteur, more like, an accountant keeping track of a list than anything that's super dangerous. He's helpful, he teaches, he doesn't immediately scream evil. But from a traditional religious perspective, any traffic with demons is supposed to be a slippery slope. Even if Samigina comes off as pleasant or wise, there's always the possibility that something darker is hiding behind the offer or the deal that you make with him. After all, if the knowledge comes from the dead, the question becomes, what's the cost of asking? And this pairing of the scholarly knowledge and the spirit evocation makes him kind of a dual agent. He moves between the classroom and the grave, the intellect and the underworld. For magicians, historians, or seekers of hidden truth, that's exactly the kind of spirit you want on speed dial, though maybe not on speakerphone. Linguistic and etymological origins. To look into this demon, I went through a lot of different places. We're going to start first with the name. So the name Samigina, also spelled Gamigin, Gamigin, or Gamigin, I'll try to put it on the screen, depending on the source, doesn't have a clear-cut origin. It's not pulled straight from any known ancient language, deity, or myth, unlike some of the other demons in the Ars Goetia, like Asmodee and Baal and so forth. Most scholars agree that the name is obscure, possibly even invented during the Renaissance grimoire tradition, just to sound demonic. But then we have that reference as well to the accuser too. So it's a bit interesting because he has two different names and one of them does show up in some text and then the other one just doesn't. But anyways, all this said, there's a few interesting leads. Some believe the name may have been inspired by a spirit called Gamgina or Gamgima from the Zohar. And this is the foundational text of Jewish mysticism. So this is the name that I was talking about. So Gamgina, who is the red malevolent spirit who joins with Satan to accuse humanity. Well, this whole connection can be speculative. The name Gamgina sounds suspiciously close to Gamigin, and the role is fitting. Both are spiritual prosecutors dealing with sin, judgment, and the fate of souls. So it kind of actually fits with this demon, and maybe this is where it all came from. Another theory connects the name to Gehenna, the Hebrew word for hell itself, derived from Gehinnom, the valley outside Jerusalem, once associated with Baal and some of the apparent sacrifices, and later with damnation. And that valley is also the lake of fire and hell. Maybe I should do an episode one day on the origins of hell. In the Greek New Testament, Gehenna becomes Gina, and through translation errors or deliberate adaptation, some have argued that Gamigin could be a warped version of the name for hell itself. If true, the name Samigina might be a kind of code, not the name of a being, but a reference to the place he rules over. Perhaps maybe the keeper of hell, not necessarily Satan or devil, but like the actual accountant of hell who keeps track of who's in there. Other linguistic guesses point towards wordplay or hybrid roots, with Gam, Hebrew for also, plus Jinn, Arabic for spirit, possibly meaning another spirit or additional accuser as well. We go back to the accuser. Again, this is all speculative, but thematically it fits really well. But in the end, with all this linguistic, talk, unlike some Goetic names with direct pagan roots, Samigina probably emerged from a stew of Renaissance occultism, a mix of Hebrew mysticism, biblical references, linguistic puns, and grimoires trying to sound more ancient than they are. Whether or not Samigina is a corrupted reference to an older being like Gamgina or a symbolic name for a demon tied to Gehenna, one thing's clear: the name was built to mean something, even if that meaning's been half buried over time, much like the spirits he summons. As well, some of these ones I mispronounce because they get very confusing, so I'm going to try to put them on the screen for you guys while I say them. Sorry. Pagan Origins. Okay, so when I did last week's episode, I completely forgot that all the demons in the Ars Goetia, they all exist in a demon degree, and I completely forgot about the degrees. It's like the choirs of angels. And so it reminded me that this particular set of demons, the initial ones that we're working through, 1 through 8, they all exist in the false gods category. So all of these demons are actually supposed to be based on a pagan god, and they were a pagan god that got converted into a demon so that, people would switch over to the one god religion, pagans would be persecuted, etc., etc. So it is interesting because last week's demon, honestly, Visago, there's really nothing to go on with Visago. It's really weird that he's even in a false gods category. But with our demon this week, Samigina, there's a lot of possibilities of where he could have came from. So we're going to review a bunch of them, and we're going to try to remember that he is in the false gods category. So we're going to kind of look for those pagan gods or something that they were trying to flip people over from. Technically, the Ars Goetia was written much later than when the whole thing happened with King Solomon and Baal and all that from the Bible. But if we follow the story of it, I think that I know what Samigina is based on, and I'll take you through my conclusion and everything. There's a lot to go through here. So, because what I essentially did for this is I went through and looked for any sort of symbolism, any sort of history, pagan legends, myths, folklore that might match this demon's description. So we're going to go through a bunch of them, and then we're going to kind of build from there what would be the most likely that is probably the origins of Samigina. And we're going to run into this. Sometimes we get a demon where it's kind of based on multiple things from the past. Sometimes we get a demon where there's a direct link like Baal or Asmodeus, things like that. So it's going to be interesting. We're going to kind of work through each of them each week. And yeah, we just got to sometimes get a deep dive like we're about to do here. So just strap in. It's a lot of information. All right, let's review this information. Also, before I begin this, I just need to explain what a psychopomp is, because this comes into play. A psychopomp comes from the Greek word psyche, which is soul, and pompos, which is guide. Psychopomps aren't judges or punishers, they're escorts, messengers between worlds. Their job is to lead the dead from this life to whatever comes next. They are in legends, myths, etc. as a creature, a spirit, an angel, a demon, or a deity whose role is to escort newly deceased souls from earth to afterlife. And there are some myths where you can call upon a psychopomp to take a living person to a dead person to speak. So this really matches the Samigina. So there's a lot of possibilities. So let's work through all the mythical origins. I just wanted to add a little snippet here. I was watching some YouTube videos about witchcraft history and things like that. I noticed that some people mistake pagan as a catch-all for witches. But I know in my videos I keep talking about pagan origins and pagan deities and things like that. Just want to make it clear, pagan is just anything that sort of predated the Bible. And it could be any religion anywhere in the world, and it doesn't mean witchcraft or sorcery or anything necessarily. So I just wanted to add that little snippet in as well for anyone who is unclear about pagan. It's sort of a catch-all term for anything that predates the Bible. Ancient Mesopotamia. All right, we're going to start with chthonic kings and dying gods of Nergal, Ereshkigal, and Dumazid. Sorry for any mispronunciations. I do Google pronunciations when I do these videos, but sometimes I get that weird website where it's someone just does a random pronunciation and people rate it 2 out of 5. So I don't really know that I'm saying anything right. And sometimes I can't find a pronunciation. So that's why they're sometimes off. So I do apologize. Samigina's role as a summoner of souls, especially those who are lost, forgotten, or trapped, it mirrors the underworld structure found in the ancient Mesopotamia religion. Nergal, a god of war and plague, eventually becomes the king of the underworld. He rules alongside Ereshkigal, the queen of the dead. Their domain is filled with dust and silence, and only the gods, or daring heroes who might travel there and return back again. Samigina, like Nergal, is a spirit with dominion over the souls of the dead. His ability to bring them forth and make them speak aligns him with these underworld rulers who decide the fate of the deceased. Then there's also Dumazid, or also known as Tammuz, a dying and rising fertility god who spends part of each year in the underworld. The seasonal death represents the cycles of loss and return, echoing the idea of Samigina also retrieving souls that haven't passed on completely, or those in purgatory, or those drowned in death but not beyond reach. And now we have our Mot and Baal, and this is the original Baal in the first episode of this series. Mot is his partner here. In the Ugaritic tablet, which is around 1300 BCE, the Canaanite god Mot, which was a personification of death, drags the storm god Baal into the underworld. As a result, the earth dries up, crops fail, and balance is lost until Baal is eventually rescued and reborn. Mot doesn't guide the dead, he devours them. He is silence, stagnation, and the grave. But the myth also highlights something deeper, the cyclical nature of descent and return, a theme echoed across many ancient beliefs. It was always tied to the harvest, right? The seasons and everything. Samigina in this light might be viewed as a scholarly, less malevolent version of Mot. He rules no kingdom, but he moves through death's territory with authority. He doesn't consume, he reveals. He brings souls forward not to destroy, but to speak. The desire to speak with the dead, to pierce the silence of the underworld, was very much alive in the ancient Near East. It was alive in a lot of the ancient cultures. The Epic of Gilgamesh even hints at necromancy, when Gilgamesh calls up the spirit of his dead friend, Enkidu, to learn what lies beyond. These practices, obviously, according to the church, right, were often taboo, even dangerous, but they underscore a powerful human urge to cross the line between the living and the dead and return with knowledge. Samigina is a demon who's built for that exact purpose. Ancient Greece and Rome. Okay, let's talk about Hermes Psychopomps, the guide of souls. Hermes, in his lesser-known role as a psychopomp, was the divine escort of souls. He guided the dead to the afterlife, especially those stuck between worlds. He didn't judge, he just delivered them. That non-violent logistical function is rare in Greek myth, and it lines up neatly with Samigina's role as a spirit who deals with the dead without destroying them. Hermes also ruled over language, logic, and rhetoric, much like Samigina, who teaches liberal sciences. Both serve as intellectual bridges between realms, scholars of the seen and unseen. And our next one in ancient Greece and Rome we're going to talk about is Charon and the unburied dead, who is the ferryman of Hades. Charon, the ferryman of the dead, took souls across the river Styx, but only those who had been properly buried. Those who drowned or lacked funerary rites were stuck in limbo. This idea of the unburied dead mirrors the drowned spirits of Samigina said to summon. As well, it includes the drowned too. Samigina's ability to call up these lost souls may also be a direct echo of the ancient fear of being forgotten, unburied, or trapped without passage, something deeply embedded in Greek funerary culture. Our next one under Greek and Rome is Odysseus and the Witch of Endor. This witch does some necromancy and spirit summoning. So in Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus travels to the underworld to speak with the prophet Tiresias. He uses ritual bloodletting to summon the dead, much like the necromantic operations in a lot of grimoires. This scene is one of the earliest literary examples of necromancy, and it lines up uncannily with Samigina's ability to draw forth spirits and speak and reveal truths. Likewise, in the Hebrew Bible, the Witch of Endor summons the spirit of the prophet Samuel at King Saul's request. Though technically forbidden, this act of spiritual consultation reflects Samigina's function, bridging the gap between the living and the dead for the sake of forbidden knowledge. Norse and Celtic Psychopomps. All right, our first one let's talk about is Epona, who is the Celtic horse goddess. So Epona was a Celtic and later Roman goddess associated with horses, fertility, and the underworld. She was revered as a protector of riders and sometimes a guide of souls. Her imagery often shows her riding or flanked by horses, surrounded by symbols of abundance and transition. Samigina, who appears as a donkey or small horse before transforming into a man, fits really cleanly into into this archetype as well. Like Epona, he may represent both the beast of burden and the guide between two worlds, a living psychopomp who carries knowledge from the land of the dead. Also, I forgot to mention this as well. In Old Norse mythos, they rarely did sacrifices other than they would do sacrifices of mainly horses, and it would be at like critical times or important times. And they always used a horse for the sacrifice, and then they would feast on it after. So the horse was like very symbolic to their practices at that time. All right, now also let's talk about Odin and the Wild Hunt. In Norse myth, Odin rides his 8-legged horse, Sleipnir, capable of crossing between worlds, including Hel, the land of the dead. And interestingly, Norse myth called the land of the dead Hel, and I think that was adopted later with the Bible because there wasn't actually a hell in the original text, right? So it's interesting. Odin frequently consults the dead for knowledge, even raising seers from their grave to ask about fate and prophecy, which is very familiar to what Samigina is doing. This imagery, the traveling god on horseback, speaking with the dead and moving between the realms of life and death, it's very close again to Samigina's function. And the Wild Hunt is often led by Odin, also adds a folklore tale to this, ghostly riders thundering through the skies, collecting souls, omens, and the forgotten. Samigina would fit right into this story. The Etruscans. Let's start off first with Tukaluka, the donkey-eared demon of the underworld. So in Etruscan mythology, Tukaluka is a chthonic demon who appears in a lot of art that is found in tombs with vulture wings, serpent hair, and donkey ears. He lives in the underworld and interacts with spirits of the dead, sometimes as a punisher, sometimes as a psychopomp, so delivering back and forth. Tukaluka's most striking link to Samigina is the donkey imagery and also being in the land of the dead. Ancient iconography, donkey features weren't comic, they were liminal, monstrous, and symbolic of the uncanny. Just like Samigina's form as a little horse or donkey, Tukaluka sits right on the edge of human, animal, and spirit, which is a threshold being. Chthonic Deities. All right, now this is multiple pagan civilizations, multiple fertility and transitional deities that we're going to cover really quick here at the end. Many ancient religions had gods and spirits that governed the thresholds of life and death, fertility and decay, summer and winter, the seasons and the harvest and so forth. Figures like Persephone, which is Greek, and then there's Dumuzid, which is Mesopotamian, and even Demeter, and she became Black Demeter in Akkadian myth, embodied this constant push and pull between vitality and the grave. Samigina fits into this transition as a modern demonized echo of that role, a being that doesn't destroy but transports. He moves souls, teaches forbidden knowledge, and serves as a guide during the times of the in-between. So there is a lot of these like deities and folklore that are these in-between, these transitional agents and the keeper of secret crossings. And he kind of fits in there a little bit. Samigina as a false god in the Ars Goetia. So like I said already, in the Ars Goetia, many spirits are labeled as false gods. The first 8 are under false gods. Pagan deities, and they're supposed to be pagan deities, are classified as demons. So Baal is a classic case, transformed from Canaanite god into the infernal prince Baal. And it kind of fits because the Ars Goetia was with King Solomon, and Baal was like a big thing in that part of the story in the Bible. So if Samigina shares the classification, then it suggests, like I said, he wasn't just a minor spirit. He must have been some kind of deity or big underworld figure or something from pre-Christian religion. In my opinion, I think his origins likely trace back to the story of the Canaanite death god Mot, combined with elements of the Jewish mysticism from the Zohar text for Gamigin. Unlike most Goetic demons, Samigina appears to be a fusion of myth and mysticism, reimagined through the lens of demonology. Even a lot of those other pagan deities and myths that we went through also fit really well with him as well. But I think that Mot might be a strong contender here for a few reasons. He was a god, not just a spirit. Mot was the Canaanite god of death, featured prominently in the Ugaritic myth. This gives him the right kind of divine status to be reclassified as a false god in the Demonology here. That was my point 1. So point 2, his domain overlaps with Samigina's. Mot rules the underworld, representing death, silence, and stasis. He drags Baal into the realm of the dead, just as Samigina deals with souls in liminal states, drowned, purgatory, hell, whatever it might be. Both figures operate on the boundary of life and death. And point number 3, his myth would have been known to Renaissance occultists. Through biblical references and early church writings on Canaanite religion, Mot would have been on the radar of anyone compiling infernal hierarchies based on pagan gods. Some of these myths and deities that we know about now, they weren't really discovered until archaeology and stuff happened. So some of the stuff they didn't know about when they were writing these texts. And point number 4, the classification really fits well. Mot, like Baal, belong to the same pantheon, and both could be candidates for demonization. If Baal came Baal, Beelzebub, whatever, it's not far-fetched to imagine that Mot resurfaced in a new grimoire-esque form like Samigina, maybe borrowing the name from the Jewish texts, right, for the accuser, which also works for his role. If Samigina really was treated as a false god in the same sense as Baal, then it adds a serious weight to the idea that he evolved from Mot, or at the very least, absorbed key aspects of his identity. Samigina might just be what happens when an ancient death god gets rebranded. Less of a devourer, more of a dignified diplomat. Still dealing with the dead, but now offering answers instead of annihilation. But then as well, like I said, I still want to touch on the Gamigin and the Jewish mysticism. It's like in the Zoharic figure, Gamigin or Gamgina, which provides the closest phonetic and conceptual match to the name Gamigin or Samigina, Older's grimoire form. And just a reminder again, in the Zohar, Gamgina is a red malevolent spirit who is an additional accuser who joins Satan in bringing judgment to humanity. The way that he's referred to is as a secondary accuser involved in the judgment. So it kind of works with Samigina's role as well, not as a punisher, but like a revealer of what this soul has done wrong. A summoner of the soul who exposes what they've done, right? And there's obviously no guarantee that they took this from the Zohar, but there is a bit of overlap here, and it kind of works based on the text and who was writing it, and it kind of all matches into the Bible too, right? The names are very identical and the functions are very closely aligned. Considering how heavily Christian occultists mined the Jewish text for mystical insights, it's highly plausible that Gamigina influenced both the name and the function of Samigina, especially his ability to summon the dead and interrogate the dead. But my final conclusions, I think, is it's a synthesis. I think taken together, Mot and Gamigin together offer a strong theory that Samigina didn't emerge from nowhere, but likely a synthesis of Canaanite mythology and Jewish mysticism, reimagined during the Renaissance as a scholarly demon of the dead. He inherits Mot's dominion over death and the underworld, and Gamigina's role as a spiritual accuser and communicator. That combination fits perfectly with the false god to demon pipeline that runs through much of the Ars Goetia. But tell me, what do you think? With all that pagan information, all the different mythologies and legends and deities that it could be, what do you think is your favorite one that matches with Samigina? Ritual symbolism. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about his symbolism and things that happen during the ritual and everything with him. I'm not going to walk you through how to summon these demons. I'm not going to do that. You can find all that stuff online. But I'm just going to kind of talk about some of the rituals, some of the symbolism in it, some of the information that they give to summoners, and so forth. Unlike many of the entities in the underworld, Samigina is well known for his honesty. When summoned, he does not engage in deceit or trickery. Rather, he only tells the truth. But again, despite his powers being positive or perceived as positive, Samigina in this instance is still a demon. So while he does not seek to deceive, he must be approached with respect and ritual protections. This is for people that, believe in demons and believe he's a demon, right? Now, for some of the more symbolism, he's a servant demon to those born between April 4th and the 8th. Which is also a more powerful time to call upon him, too. Wednesday is linked with the planet of communication, Mercury, which is an opportune day for summoning Samigina. Also, people who summon him, they recommend having a small horse figurine to represent Samigina's initial form, and it's placed on the altar as a focus for the summoning ritual. On top of his symbol, his sigil would be like the primary focus. Incense is optional during his summoning, but if you do incense, you'd want to use sandalwood or myrrh because it can enhance the ritual by being a conducive atmosphere for spiritual communications. Additional offerings for the demon Samigina. Samigina isn't the kind of spirit that you win over with flashy displays. So he values knowledge and sincerity and intention. So if you offer things like old esoteric books, especially ones tied to history, philosophy, or the occult, those are things that he likes as offerings. Also, he likes silver objects and earth-based items like crystals or stones can also align with all of his energy too. The key with him is not extravagance. It's about meaning. Offering should reflect respect, curiosity, and a desire to learn. He knows the difference between a thoughtful gift and a half-hearted one. Now, some people say that the planet that he's linked to is Neptune, which is the planet of dreams, intuition, and spiritual depth. Neptune's energy mirrors Samigina's role as a bridge between worlds, making a strong influence to align with during rituals or meditations involving him. As I already mentioned, his preferred metal is silver. Silver is a symbol of reflection, clarity, and truth. Its a mirror-like quality reflects Samigina's honesty and insight, while its connection to lunar or spiritual forces makes it a powerful addition to rituals calling upon him. And the element, as I already mentioned, that he's tied to is earth. And this represents stability, wisdom, and grounded knowledge. It reflects his role as a guide and a communicator, someone who offers clarity and insight rather than chaos and confusion. The astrological sign assigned to him is Pisces. Pisces is a deeply intuitive and spiritual water sign. Pisces linked to the unseen and the emotional realm fits as well with Samigina's nature as a spirit who seeks to speak with the dead and deals in hidden knowledge. Neptune is Pisces' ruling planet, and that deepens the connection even further. Modern day. Okay, so where does Samigina stand today? Well, Samigina may not be as well known as some of the other flashier demons, but he's quietly made his way into pop culture, especially in stories where guidance, truth, or necromancy insight plays a key role. In literature, he shows up as a mentor-like figure, someone who helps protagonists navigate between worlds, offering wisdom or hard truths. And that lines up with his mythological role as well, and his honest voice among the dead. He has shown up in some video games and usually find him as a summonable entity or a consulted spirit, the kind that you can call in when a big decision is to be made. Samigina has shown up in the game Dragon Quest and La Megaton, and I think there's a game called like Night Online or something where he shows up as a boss as well that you can fight. In film and TV, he has shown up, I think this is an anime, Megami Tensei, and in that show again, he's like a guide and a truth speaker and keeper of forbidden knowledge. Pretty much in all the modern media so far that he's shown up in, he's been more as not a villain, but like a strange kind of ally, someone that you can summon to gain help from and knowledge from. Samigina isn't a demon of destruction or temptation. He's a spirit of knowledge, transition, and communication. A psychopomp in donkey form. A librarian of the damned. A forgotten echo of older gods who once ruled the spaces between life and death. Whether he emerged from Kabbalistic mysticism, Canaanite death myths, or was dreamed up by Renaissance magicians piecing together scraps of old beliefs. The result is the same. Samigina is a figure that demands respect, not fear. If nothing else, he reminds us that the most powerful voices in the spirit world aren't always the loudest. All right, that is our demon for this week. Let me know below. Leave a comment and let me know what you think his pagan origins might have been. Maybe also a mashup of a few. As well, if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe. Every week there's going to be a new demon as we work through the Ars Goetia, and then we'll start working through other side things too. I know some people want to do Gilgamesh. I might do an episode where I talk about the origins of hell because I do find it very fascinating. It's really interesting how it kind of came to be. So we're going to be doing more stuff like this. So subscribe if you've enjoyed it, share as well. It helps out the channel quite a bit. Speaking of helping out the channel, thank you to all the members who do support this channel. I do appreciate it quite a lot. As well, if you're interested in membership, you get early access to things that is ad-free viewing, or sometimes there's member-only videos. Anything in member-only status is all ad-free. If you're interested to learn more, just click the join button below. All right, now all that being said, thank you guys for sticking around for the end of this video. I do appreciate it, and thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.